Atlanta was bad. Atlanta pulled off that embarrassing win against them. But I think with Cordell Patterson out, that was their main source of offense for the last couple games. And Tampa Bay's got Godwin another week healthier. They're coming off an embarrassing loss, like not just a loss, an embarrassing loss. And I think they're going to come out pissed off, just like we came out after that Colts game and we embarrassed Tampa. I think they're going to come out looking to embarrass Atlanta. I don't think Atlanta has the firepower to keep up with Tampa with Godwin back. I think Tampa could run away with that one early and kind of coast on it.
I agree, and I figure that if Atlanta has any hope of winning this thing, they will probably drag it out, just run the ball as hard as they can and as much as they can. But that just seems like a recipe to get your starting quarterback Mariota hurt, in my opinion, especially in this game because this is one of those, like you said, that Atlanta tends to try to squeak out a win with them, and those guys like Antoine Winfield are not going to be willing to take that laying down, especially after, of course, the loss that they just suffered. So they're not going to be willing to take that laying down. So, uh, shoot, let's go to the Chicago Bears and the Minnesota Vikings, which is another divisional game. The Bears are 2-2, and the Vikings are 3-1. You got anything on that?
Bears just can't figure out their offense. They can't get anything rolling. They've struggled getting the ball to the people they acquired this offseason. They've got Mooney, they've got Byron Pringle, and I think Mooney has had one decent game this whole season. I just don't think they have any firepower at all, and their running game isn't elite like some of the other teams that have slower passing games. I mean, the Vikings are probably sad to say with Cousins, but they're probably one of the best teams in the NFC right now. I just don't think that Chicago can even come close to matching Jefferson and Thielen and Dalvin Cook if he's back. I mean, this one could probably get ugly fast and be 20-point lead by halftime.
Question. Is this a true, is this a real 3-1 for Minnesota? I
I,
don't,
I just don't
huh?
think the AFC is that good this year. I think that the AFC is kind of stacked with the top teams. I think the 49ers may possibly be the best NFC team. I'm not convinced on the Eagles yet. The Vikings are kind of up there in that 3-4 range around Green Bay. I think they have the edge on Green Bay right now, but I just don't think there's a whole lot of talent in that NFC right now, unless Tampa can turn things around. But the Bears are kind of at the bottom of the spectrum. So even a decent Minnesota team should be able to move the ball consistently against the Bears defense the way they've looked. That offense can't get anything going. I don't think
I
it's
think I, I think
it,
Chicago is devoid of as much talent as they used to have, and not having talent is always a problem when you're on the football field, and they just can't overcome that. I just don't think that they can, and especially with the first year head coach and Matt Eberflus, I think that first year coach, first year GM, like they're starting from scratch, trying to build up some wins, build up some rapport, and it ain't looking good.
they've got that
How they squeaked out these two wins, I don't know.
they've got that man Justin Fields in a really bad situation.
They should have never drafted him and then just got rid of the GM, Ryan Pace. They should have never allowed Ryan Pace to draft him because they knew they were firing him. I don't understand that at all. But yeah, the Vikings are defense of the Vikings has not progressed like I thought they would. They went in on defensive backs a little while ago, and they just haven't progressed like I thought they would. They brought in Zadarius Smith. Uh, hold on, is that the right one? If I'm not tripping, they brought in Zadarius Smith, and it's just the defense is not where it's supposed to be. It's not at all. Um, let's move on to the Detroit Lions versus the New England Patriots. The Lions are 1-3. The Patriots are 1-3, and I don't know what to say about these two teams. I like the Lions and I like Dan Campbell. He's easy to like just because of his natural moxie and whatnot. And the Lions are playing hard. Then they're in almost every game. It's just they're not winning. So
Well, here's the problem with the Lions. They've got the number one scoring offense in the NFL and the number 32 ranked defense in the NFL. So they're putting up a crap ton of yards, a crap ton of points, but their defense is just like running through paper. Like they have no defense, that they don't even slow teams down. But
which is something I was surprised at with Dan Campbell at the helm. I thought the defense would be better and the offense would be worse.
you think that offense is scary now? That offense is playing without Jamison Williams. They add another component like Jamison Williams,
And they
but
got him.
if their defense is allowing a touchdown on every drive, all you can do is just match them. And that's what they're doing. I mean, they're in shootouts with teams that aren't really that good. So I'm not convinced that they're great yet. They're going to have to start to build a defense. They've got the parts there on offense, but I'm also really down on the Patriots. Patriots just don't have anything. And even Bill Belichick being the mastermind that he is, you can't just you can't scheme up a bad team like that and expect a good result. I mean, you got to have a mediocre team at least to be able to scheme things.
I completely agree. And I know they got Jamie Collins back, but I don't know what that means. Doesn't mean much to me. So I don't know.
I,
I I, I
I
do expect that the Lions can probably pull this out, but the defense has got to show up on some point on their side. But um, you got anything else for that one before we move on?
no, that's
Because
kind of
I'm trying to be cognizant of the time.
yeah. I don't think anybody's really gonna be watching that game. It's two bottom of the division teams. That game doesn't really matter at this point, unless the Patriots can somehow develop an offense over the next couple months, and the Lions a defense. Both of those teams kind of are going to be irrelevant this year.
Um, let's go to the Houston. Let's go to another irrelevant team versus a team that we thought would be irrelevant in a AFC South battle. The Houston Texans versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Houston Texans are like 0-3-1, and the Jags are 2-2. Looks like nah, I almost call that man Herbert. Look like Trevor Lawrence is learning. He's figuring. He's starting to click things in his head about how the NFL works. Doug is got that defense playing up to levels beyond themselves. Um, it's starting to come together for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So it seems.
I mean,
Houston, not so much.
as many
Houston is the exact opposite of what Jacksonville has showed us over the past two games.
as many first round picks as the Jaguars have had over the last 6 years, they better start to be putting some pieces together.
You got to get it right at some point. The NFL sets it up this way, so eventually you'll be able to compete. To compete.
I mean, they've had, I think, either the first or second pick in the draft almost every year for the last 5 years. I mean, they've had early first round picks for a while now, ever since they shelled out that defense that was solid.
That was what 2017 that they went deep in the playoffs. Yeah, 17. I want to say. Oh God, that was 5 years ago. Shoot.
Yeah, and I think they've consistently been either the worst record or if not close to us. I mean, I think they've had a top 5 pick in each one of those, and I think they had extra picks from some of those players they traded off from D Hop and some of those defensive players. I think Jalen Ramsey. I think they. So I mean, they've had the picks. They should be starting to develop at this point. I think that's what we're seeing. 5 years of early first round picks with some extra picks added in at that four
Not
or
to
5 year mark.
mention,
They're developing.
not to mention, they didn't screw up the head coaching hire like they did last season. Like we can't ignore that part. Uh, Doug Peterson working with them boys down there, and he's doing a good job. Houston, on the other hand, I like Lovie Smith, I always have, but and the defense, I will give them this. The defense is starting to come around. It's starting to look a little bit better than what it did. You got the young guys playing. Derek Stingley looks good, but for some reason that team just doesn't have the fire that I thought they would have. They don't have that want to win attitude, in my opinion. It doesn't look like they. I don't know. Doesn't look like they really playing to win the game. It looks like they're playing just to stay ahead of keep their heads above water. I don't know
To,
what it looks like to you, but it just doesn't look like a winning effort to me.
to me, this is the difference between the two teams. Both of them pretty much shelled out and gutted their teams over the last 5 years. I think if you look at the Texans, they got rid of DeAndre Hopkins. Let's see, who else? Who was that? They had a cornerback too.
Hopkins, they got rid of what's his face that went to the Packers. I want to say the uh, defensive lineman.
Yeah, and then
Um,
Watson, they shipped him off to Cleveland. And then you look at the Jaguars, they got rid of Ramsey. I think Miles Jack retired. I think we put him into retirement.
Miles Jack and like the Jags just kind of started selling off parts pretty quickly.
Yeah. AJ
So
Bouye.
yeah,
Like I said, they both teams kind of went through the same thing. They kind of completely shelled out and gutted their team to rebuild. The Texans didn't do it right, and the Jaguars did. I mean, the Texans gutted and rebuilt to bring in Deshaun Watson, and that was going to be their key piece to build around. And all of that happened, and they ended up shipping him out, and that's going to set them back for years. But
I agree. That's
Jacksonville
definitely
gutted their team, used that to get Trevor Lawrence and rebuilding around him. So that's kind of what we're seeing. That one rebuild worked, and the other one didn't.
yes, indeed. Let's move on to this Chargers game. The Los Angeles Chargers versus the Cleveland Browns. The Chargers are 2-2. The Browns are 2-2. Anything significant?
I don't think the Chargers can stop that Cleveland running game.
I don't think they can.
If we
And
everybody acted like that Chargers defensive line was so good, that was kind of the emergence of where we saw Clyde and our running game take off was in that Chargers game. Their
glad you
defensive line
brought that.
great behind their defensive ends. So I just
I'm
don't
so
think
glad you brought that up.
I don't think they can stop that 1-2 punch of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and especially the screen game. We ate them alive with that screen game, and I think Cleveland will pull this one off. As much as I think that the Chargers are probably the more well-rounded team, I still think Herbert's hurt a little bit. I think his ribs still aren't 100%. Their defensive line, their interior defensive line, has not looked good. That's looked like one of their weaknesses, and that is Cleveland's strength. If you don't have a strong defensive line, they are going to run that ball 40 times a game and just beat you up.
We also can't forget that, like you said, Herbert's hurt, and Miles Garrett is now back from his car accident, which we're glad to see. But like it is not their defense is still pretty stout. and they can get after the quarterback, and